Testing. Tuesday afternoon, Mr. Briggs dumped a bag full of playing cards on the classroom floor. Pair up, take 25 cards. He passed out sheets of paper with the 5 symbols printed on them. I guess he had designed the pages on the computer. He also passed out glue and those blunt scissors, the kind people give little kids so they won't hurt themselves or someone else. All right, get to work, he said. We started making the decks, gluing symbols onto the faces of the playing cards. There was a square, a star, a plus sign, a minus sign, and wavy lines. Why can't we just use pieces of paper? Torchy asked. Anyone? Mr. Briggs asked the class. The backs have to be identical, Flinch said. Right, Mr. Briggs noted. If there are any differences in the shape of the cards, the test results aren't valid. We made up all the cards we needed to by the end of the class. The next day, we started the test. Before we began, Mr. Briggs gave us some instructions. The tester has to keep score. Get out a piece of paper. Every time the subject makes a guess, write either H for hit or M for miss, but don't let the other person see the card, even after he's guessed. That information could be used to help make the next guess. When you finish the test, count up the hits and the misses. I wrote a program to keep track of the scores. Go to the computer and select the name of the sender and receiver and enter how many hits you recorded. He paused for a minute. I guess he was waiting to see if there were any questions. Nobody said anything. Okay, pair up and let's get started. For the first test, I was paired with Lucky. I got 6 right. Lucky got 5 right. That was about what I expected. There were 5 different symbols, so I guess each one had a 1 in 5 chance of being right. With 25 cards, a person who was just guessing blindly would be right about 5 times. A person might beat the odds and guess right 6 or 7 times, or maybe even 8, but someone who could read minds would get a high score like 15 or 20. Pick another partner, Mr. Briggs said after everyone had finished the first pair of experiments. I found myself with one of the runts. I got 5 hits, and so did he. Right on at the average for each of us. On the last round of the day, as everyone scrambled for partners, I took too long making up my mind. There was only one person left. Cheater looked at me from across the room. I'd avoided him so far, I just didn't want to be part of the proof. That way he couldn't blame me, but now I had no choice. I'll go first, he said. You be the tester. He seemed happy we were working together and eager to get started. I reached for the top card. It took me 2 tries to get a grip on it. I stared at the figure on the edge of the card. Square, I thought, trying to imagine a giant square. Star, Cheater guessed. I wrote M on a pad to record the miss and picked up the next card. It was a cross. Wavy lines, Cheater guessed. That's how it went. As each card slid off the deck, I felt a little more of my confidence drain away. Cheater missed every single one. At first I was disappointed, but as I entered the score on the computer, I felt a bit relieved too. Maybe it had been my imagination. Maybe it was time to forget the whole thing. One moment, please. I got 7 right when Cheater tested me. Hey, it looks like you're the mind reader, he said, grinning. I held back a nasty reply. He was just trying to be friendly. That was the last test we had time for that period. We ran another 3 sets on Thursday. By then, everyone was talking about the experiment. I got 8 once, Torchy said, but another time I just got 3. Well, it balances out, I told him. If you ran 1 test, just about anything could happen. 1 test doesn't mean much at all. If you ran 10 tests, you'd probably come close to the average. But if you ran 1,000 tests, you'd get even closer. I wanted to explain more about averages, but I stopped when I noticed his eyes starting to glaze over. My own words lingered on my mind. 1 test doesn't mean much at all. I wondered whether my 1 test with Cheater was a fluke. Maybe he'd scored higher with the other people. I'd find out soon enough. The next day, everyone seemed eager to hear the results. Well, class, Mr. Briggs said, we have some interesting numbers. He had the computer keyboard on his lap. First, let's see if anyone scored higher than we expected, since that's the whole point of our investigation. I'll pull up a list of subjects who averaged better than 5 hits on their tests. We all crowded around the monitor. A bunch of names scrolled, and I could feel a wave of excitement pass through the room. Nobody, except for me, had ever expected any sort of special results, and I definitely hadn't expected more than 1 mind reader to show up in the class. Now, let's check the specific details, Mr. Briggs said. He hit a few more keys. The screen changed. We seemed to have 2 groups that had high scores. Robert, Justin, and Trevor all did better than average. I'll pull up their results and see what you think. I looked at the information. Each of the three had scored a perfect round of 25 hits. That was amazing. Then I noticed something else. Each had only done it once, and in every case, the tester was the same, Avery Morrison, one of the runts. Squinty, a couple kids said, calling Avery by his nickname. Then they'd realized the pattern at the same time that I did. Everyone turned towards him. Squinty looked back, peering at us through his thick glasses. What's everyone staring at? Mr. Briggs handed him a deck of the test cards. Hold one up, but don't let me see. Avery held up a card, raising it close to his face. No, not here, Mr. Briggs said. Let's go over to where you usually sit. The light's better over there. He followed Squinty to a corner of the rug near a window. After they sat down, Mr. Briggs tilted his head a bit, as if searching for something, and then he said, minus sign. Yeah, Squinty said, you got it. Square, Mr. Briggs said for the second card. Wow, right again. Squinty told him, another square. Yep, star. Holy smokes, you got another one. Mr. Briggs named a couple more cards before Squinty caught on. By then, the rest of us were laughing hard enough to split a gut. It was like watching a magic act. Robert, Justin, and Trevor, who had each done the same thing during the actual test, were laughing the hardest of all. Finally, Mr. Briggs, who was laughing too, said, this is a great lesson. It shows one way an experiment could go wrong. In this case, nobody intended to cheat, but I suspect that the opportunity was just as irresistible to the three of you who noticed the reflection in Avery's glasses. Of course, the instant we saw perfect scores, we should have become suspicious. As Mr. Briggs said it, I heard Bloodbath say, damn. Then Bloodbath started looking around like he was thinking about leaving the room. Mr. Briggs, staring at Bloodbath, said, so, say someone who wanted to be really clever while cheating shouldn't get perfect scores. It would be a lot better to miss a couple of times. He went back to the computer, pulled up some information, and he didn't say anything about the data. He just pointed to a column of numbers on the screen. I think everyone understood what was going on right away. Bloodbath had gotten 4 perfect scores, but the tester in each case had been one of his buddies. They'd obviously cheated just for the sake of cheating. Maybe they thought it was a good joke. Maybe they were so used to cheating maybe they were so used to cheating whenever they could that they'd just naturally done it during the test. But, as Mr. Briggs had pointed out, they hadn't been clever enough. Now, let's throw out these cases and look at the rest of our results. Let's see who did better than 5 right. He tapped a few more keys. As you can see, nobody managed to score 6 hits per test. The highest average was 5.76, roughly 5 3/4. So at least as far... I'm almost done, buddy. You're being so good. Oh, okay. Why don't you go sit on the sofa? I'll be right there. So, at least as far as this experiment is concerned, we have no real evidence of psychic ability.
I want big branches fell down.
Oh my goodness, that is a big branch. Mommy will clean it up later, bud. That was it then. Scientific proof that I had been wrong. I heard Cheater snicker. When he caught me looking at him, he said, sorry. I guess he hadn't meant to laugh at me. That was okay. I sort of deserved it. As a matter of fact, Mr. Briggs said, the average for the entire class, once we throw out the bad data, is just a bit better than 4.5 hits. I suspect it would be a lot closer to 5 if we ran more tests, but we've done enough to learn a few things. And that, my friends, should always be the point of one of these exercises. The class spent the rest of the period discussing the test and the results. Mr. Briggs talked about ways to design a better experiment, ways to prevent cheating. Apparently that was a big problem. Sometimes people wanted to prove something so badly that they cheated when they ran a test. In a way, I was relieved that we'd run an actual scientific test and it had shown no evidence that anyone could read minds. I could get on with my life and stop driving myself crazy with the wild ideas about that kind of stuff. As I left class, I shook my head, thinking about how stupid Bloodbath had been when he tried to get away with those perfect scores. It was funny that he'd given himself away by cheating too successfully, but that led me to another thought, and it came to me so suddenly that I wanted to dash right back into the room. Instead, I waited until Mr. Briggs left. The program was still up on the computer. Even better, the file with the results is open. I pulled down the menu and sent the data to the printer. It was the old kind that makes a lot of noise and spits out a single line at a time. I watched the pages as they inched out, revealing something that I'd almost missed. My hand shook so badly I ripped the edge of the last sheet as I tore it from the printer. There was no doubt about it, no mistake. I had definite proof. I wasn't sure I wanted it, but I had it. The question was, what should I do with it?